Friends and enemies, welcome to yet another edition of the Mighty Canadian Bitcoiners podcast. I'm Len the Legend, taking this one away from Joey. And today I'll be talking to Toine, and we'll be talking about something which I hope is very interesting to a lot of the folks out there. He's a Canuck he's a Bitcoin mining enthusiast. And specifically, he's doing services where you can install your ASIC into a central heating unit, into your central system there. So you're able to heat your home at the same time as earning Satoshis. So you're mining and you're reclaiming the heat that is being generated from these ASICs. This is rather cool. But before we could talk to Toine and really dive into the topics that I want to discuss, a couple of sponsors I got to talk about, a couple of things off my list that I have to ensure that I check off. Number one, we have EasyDNS. It's a based company. We only deal with based companies here at the CBP, right? We don't deal with anybody that's not based. And why we like them, they've been around for a long time. So if you want to do web hosting, email hosting, you want to start up a website, migrate your website, migrate your email over to a service, to a company that provides a service for decades, and you know you're not going to get rugged, these are the guys you want to talk to. Mark and his team, they're the best. Talk to anybody that has dealt with them. They will say that they are number one. They provide excellent service. And good thing you could do with EasyDNS, you could pay with your Bitcoin, right? Like, look at that. The price of Bitcoin, it went up a little bit today. So you may want to start spending it in one particular way. That's one way you could do it, is start paying for your web hosting or email hosting or maybe server, whatever you want to do with them. They got you covered. Check them out. If you're going to use our promo code CBP Media, 50% will be taken off your initial purchase. So what I suggest is load up your cart, because you're going to maximize your savings by doing that. Check them out, easydns.com. Don't forget to use our promo code CBP Media. Second sponsor we have is Bull Bitcoin, and it's a great place to buy and sell your Bitcoin. Not sure what you want to do, but you have different options you could do over there. On-chain Lightning. Last I checked a couple of days ago, on-chain was cheap. Let's assume it still is. So continually do your buys on-chain, but Lightning is there in case there's a spike in fees nonetheless. But rather than just simply buying or selling, there's other things you could do with your Bitcoin. You could buy some gift cards through Bull Bitcoin. You can start spending your Bitcoin indirectly like that. So you could buy like a Home Depot or a Starbucks gift card with your Bitcoin and start spending that in the real world. So you're kind of living on a Bitcoin standard. The second thing you could do is pay your bills. Price of Bitcoin spiked today, so might as well pay off those credit card bills or delinquent car payments, whatever you have that needs to be done. You could use your Bitcoin to do that. Also, they're non-custodial. This is what you want in exchange. You don't want anybody holding on to your coin. They won't. You have to provide an address in which when you facilitate your buy. Check them out. Use our referral code below. If you do that, 25% will be taken off your fees moving forward indefinitely. So check them out. They are wonderful at that. All right. With the formalities out of the way, let's bring in Toine and discuss Bitcoin mining. Toine, how are you, buddy?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. You and I, we have indirectly been dealing with each other. We are in a chat, and we'll call it Unhinged. We won't go too much further into that, but I think for the most part, that's been our communication with each other. It's through that chat. So it's good. I mean, we have met in the past very briefly in an informal setting, but it's good now that we could sit down and have a chat. So I'm happy to bring you on here to discuss Bitcoin mining. But before we go any further, Toine, I want to hear your background before we even get into Bitcoin, because this is going to help make the basis of who you are and why you got into what it is you're doing. So give me a little bit of background of who you are. Let's educate the audience.
Yeah, I think you could summarize me in one word. I'm a builder. I like to build and create things. I have a background in design and engineering. I've worked in architectural visualization. I've done a lot of 3D modeling and manufacturing engineering. That was kind of where I started after school. Pivoted to architectural rendering, which kind of introduced me to computer hardware, which was a really cool gateway into Bitcoin mining. So I guess the whole backstory there is I like to use my hands, like to build things, and interacting with Bitcoin was fun financially, but I really kind of got a lot out of it when I started interacting with the hardware. building things, running a node, playing with Bitcoin miners. That's kind of what sparked my interest there.
Bitcoin mining, like, why is this something that interests you? I mean, you're a builder, you're getting your hands dirty. Like, why specifically that? I mean, it's a very niche market. So, like, what's the lure for that?
So it was funny. It was described this way at the Denver conference, the Undermine conference. So if Bitcoin is a niche in the financial markets, Bitcoin mining is a niche of the niche, and Bitcoin mining for heat reuse, which is what I specialize in, is a niche of a niche of a niche. So what I liked about it was solving problems. I love solving problems. When I first got a miner in 2021, I thought I could just run it on the kitchen counter. I quickly realized the heat and noise more than anything made that not feasible. So I started solving problems around those parameters, and a few years later, out of necessity for myself, trying to solve my own problems, I feel like I came up with some really cool designs, services, products that I thought would help a lot of other people. So about a year ago, that's when 256 Heat was born. And that's what I specialize in, kind of helping people transform their miners into heaters that automatically adjust to conditions, pay them to heat their homes. In many cases, there's no justification to run them unless you're using them for heat reuse. So that's kind of the idea there. I love the idea, the efficiency gains in turning, junk into treasure, and turning things that are not profitable into something that allows you to either heat for free or, getting paid to heat, which is in Ontario, that's actually possible if you do some clever things with timing. But that's what appeals to me the most.
We'll get into that, and I'm going to give you a shameless plug, and we'll do this again after. Heat Inc., and that's www.256heat.com. Is that correct?
That's correct, yep.
And you're the owner of that. But before we go any further, 2021 is when you bought your first miner. What did you buy that you thought that you could plug in on your kitchen counter and run? Was it an S9 or something more powerful than that?
It was a Miner M30 S++. So it was I think it was 111 terahash and 3,600 watts. So back then you feed a lot of watts to get that kind of output. So and before, there was no firmware to really play around with, and so the thing was just always on at max. So super loud, super hot. Big heavy unit, and I like the design. I always thought the aluminum extrusion kind of cases and things were cool, and everything was very modular. So my mind was kind of going on maybe there's some 3D printed things that could be done here initially. But seeing all the things the community's done was really inspiring, and that's kind of what inspired me to take that leap and get into this full time.
And yeah, you're right. Brains didn't provide. I don't know if they do now. Even
no.
They didn't and Lux OS, I don't think was available. No. It's you really were stuck with the stock firmware.
Yeah, still are.
Like you say,
I think it's all been made for those companies. Yeah.
I want to just hear, when you plugged it in, what was your first reaction to that? Were you expecting it to be rather quiet and not give off a lot of heat?
I knew it was loud. I think what's deceiving is the decibel scale, because it kind of works exponentially. So 100 decibel isn't twice as loud as 50 decibel. It's exponentially louder. So when you go, 60 decibels is background traffic noise. 80 can't be that bad. And then you plug in 80 and you're like, my ears are bleeding. This is crazy. I can't do this anymore. So it's a lot of realizations that happened that week.
It reminds me of a very old Simpsons episode. And I think it was Dr. Nick Riviera went on a talk show and he was showing off his juicer. And it was so loud, they were turning oranges into orange juice. And he's yelling, "It's whisper quiet," trying to show off how quiet the equipment is. But in reality, just like an ASIC, it's motherfucking loud. So yeah. All right. The problem that exists, let's talk about this, is people that want a home mine, they plug in their unit and it's doing this thing, but they're not taking advantage of one of the waste products, which is heat. You are trying to capture that and to try that, make it usable for the home owners. Explain this.
Yeah. So after the halving, I kind of identified an opportunity. A lot of miners right after that day, that April 19th last year, they immediately became unprofitable. And I was racking my brains as to like, how do we get these things plugged back in? What's the best way to do it? You saw the price of the miners get dropped too. They were like a third of what they were even a few months before that. So I was looking for, how do we turn the heat, which is a problem, into a product? And a big part of that was trying to, you kind of have to just ditch the stock fans. And once you do that, then everything kind of adjusts to like a standardized 8-inch HVAC ducting components. And once you get onto that standard, you've got any number of, flanges and 3-way valves and Y pipe distributors, and a number of things you can use to kind of manage that heat and run it. And then the next logical step was, understanding that according to building code here in North America, every house that's built since like 70 something has to have some sort of forced air HVAC system. So by leveraging the existing infrastructure in the home, the HVAC system, you can essentially pump your exhaust air into your air return plenum, which is a negative pressure. So it's helping pull the heat away from the chips, and then redistribute that heat with your standard HVAC system, your fan. Once I figured that out, it was like, aha, okay, this actually makes a lot of sense, because I was heading towards immersion mining and using water cooled or liquid cooled as my base, because once you have a liquid medium to transfer that heat, it's a lot more manageable. But there was no way to do that, as far as I could tell, without increasing the cost substantially, which impacts ROI. And that first year of operation, ROI was a problem, because miners were expensive. You kind of had to have 100% uptime systems where you were just diverting, because you couldn't justify taking like a $5,000 miner and running it like 40% of the time. So yeah, just kind of like innovation through necessity, trying to turn garbage into gold, and landed on the current system that I have, which kind of the miner kind of articulates to its current need. So the colder it is, the higher the wattage, the higher the terahash output. The warmer it is, the lower the wattage. And by doing that, there was a huge light bulb moment, like, okay, I can increase efficiency, which increases profitability. I can increase uptime. I can decrease noise. So there were all these things that fell into place to land on the current system. But it was a couple of years of experimenting and kind of like hitting my head against the wall and, redesigning, going back, redesigning. And yeah, that's kind of how I ended up here.
So you have some experience dealing with dielectric fluid?
I don't. I was starting to dabble, and I had a fog hashing C6 tank in a cart ready to check out, and something kind of pulled me away from it. I think I was running some numbers, and I was like, oof, it's a hard sell. If you're not a Bitcoiner, it's almost impossible to sell a $12,000 system, unless you have the need for like a large scale heating operation. My focus is on like small scale residential. I think that's kind of the distributed nature appeals to me, and the ability to help like the individual, I think, appeals to me. I know there's a few companies out there that do like Amazon warehouse heating, and it's extremely lucrative because these things, if it works with one, you scale up to 100 and, works even better. But meeting cool Bitcoiners and, helping out people individually has been really gratifying for me.
And I'm going to just stick on this immersion heating quickly, or immersion cooling, and probably the last question. Do you know if it's gotten any cheaper over time, given the fact, there's been more R&D involved in the whole sphere, plus maybe economy of scale could bite into the cost of it. So over time, do you know if it has gotten any cheaper?
It has, yeah. There's a whole bunch of builders I met in Denver that are doing awesome stuff that are able to cut costs considerably from what I've even seen a couple years ago when I first started looking. Dane from Hashrate House, Nick from Constellation, Bob from Home Bitcoin Mining. These guys have kind of custom designed their own enclosures in some cases, and have kind of plug and play systems. So if you want to heat your pool or your hot water in the house, they do have systems that I believe are more affordable than like the fog hashing units, but I haven't checked prices of those in a while. And But yeah, it's cool to see like things as people build more, they're finding ways to bring prices down, and as miners come down in price because they get older, you can maybe justify using one of these in a residential setting.
So the company which you are an owner of, Heat Inc., and that's once again, it's www.256heat.com. What services can you provide to a homeowner if they come to you and say, I want to heat my home with an ASIC? So what it is that your company does to help them out?
Yeah, so the first way I interface is like on a consulting basis. I'll do like a free heat audit just to understand like how viable hash rate heating is for that customer. Knowing things like the square footage of the house, what the current heating fuel is, whether it's electrical, like electric resistive heating, or natural gas, or propane, or diesel heating oil. All of these inputs kind of affect the validity of my solution. So understanding that, then designing, if everything looks good, if there's the price for electricity is low enough, or the substitutes costs are high enough, then I can make a case for designing a system, which usually at that point we go into something called the scope of work document, which outlines everything from requirements from the client side, schedule, cost, payment plan, all that. And then if everything looks good, if it's somewhere local, I will install it personally. I'll show up and bring everything needed to install it. It takes 4 to 6 hours to install a couple miners straight into the air duct return. Most of my clients are actually not within driving distance, as you would imagine, and 80% of them being in the US. So what I do there is I pre-assemble everything in-house, test it, run it for about a week just to tune all the profiles. And then I will pack everything up, ship it to client, and then there's like a 4 to 6 hour video call or phone call that I run them through the assembly process. What's cool about it is I've got it down to like an IKEA level now, where you just need a screwdriver to do it, except for cutting the hole in the duct. But there's a quick and easy tool that just zips those holes out, perfect 8-inch diameter hole. So yeah, that's kind of the majority of the client relations that I have.
So the free heat audit that you provide, what area of coverage do you provide in I guess, Southern Ontario, or like maybe even more local than that? I'm wondering where it is you cover.
The heat audits all over North America. Like I've done these heat audits for clients in as far south as Savannah, Georgia, as far north as I think Thunder Bay is my furthest north client, or maybe Montreal. But for the local installs, it's the same kind of heat audit. The heat audit's just to kind of justify or like to validate if hash rate heating is right for that client. And if it is, like in Ontario and Quebec, it's probably like some of the best. Other than like Wyoming and parts of Texas, we have really cheap electricity, but we also have variable rates, and our cheapest rate coincides with when it's coldest. So it's an overnight rate at 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So almost every miner is profitable at 2.8 cents Canadian. So the systems I've designed are really good to increase profitability in the case that you have like variable rates. So yeah, for Canadians especially, they make a lot of sense, these systems. I know like you could take an old machine like a J Pro and basically have break even cost on your electrical bill. So $100 of electricity, $100 worth of sats every month. So that's a nice place to be, where you're getting free heat, you're stacking sats passively, you're not increasing your overall expenditure.
And with respect to the rates themselves, you're going to be asking the homeowners to change their billing with the local company, the local electric company, because I think in Ontario there's two different options. There's one, it's just a standard rate where you have high payments, mid payments, and low payments. But what you're referring to is the ultra low payments that apply, I think, between the hours of midnight and 6. Am I correct on that?
So there's 3 tiers now. There's tiered, there's time of use, and then there's ultra low overnight. Ultra low overnight is from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. But basically only on peak, which is 28 cents per kilowatt hour, is not profitable. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you curtail 5 hours a day, Monday to Friday, which is basically, if you look at it on a monthly basis, it's just an 80% curtailment, or sorry, 20% curtailment, your 80% uptime. You can improve profitability by about 35 to 40% just by cutting out that ultra expensive time of use rate.
Has there been any talk about during the ultra high cost of 28 cents per kilowatt hour to power those units with solar? Because that's going to be the time of the day where the sun is most prominent. Granted, in the wintertime, it's not we don't get a lot of sun, but I'm wondering if that's one way to offset that. Have you explored that option?
Yeah, so I have some clients in the northeast of the U.S. and they have extremely expensive electric rates, like in New York, Connecticut, Vermont. And a few of my clients in those parts of the world do use solar to kind of, accompany their total. Like they can basically use solar during the day and battery. Here in Ontario, it's not as popular because our winters are quite long and dark. And once the snow falls, you'd have to have a pretty vertical pitch on the panels to avoid them getting, kind of clad with snow. So I've looked at it. One of the things I've also looked at is just getting the battery bank and then charging them up during the 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour, then discharging them. But the batteries are so much more expensive than the solar panels. It's kind of, you have to be pretty sure it's going to be like a long payoff for those systems. So what I look at is kind of, I'm more of a pragmatist. Like those are great systems. And even just for personal use, they're awesome. In case the power goes out, you can be, more self-sustained. But pragmatically, they will increase the ROI if they're included in like a build to the point where it's going to be really, you're not looking at a year or two, you're looking at 5 or 10 years to make that back. And then you probably have to justify newer miners because of the higher uptime. So it's one of those things where, if you've got money to burn, go for it.
Yeah.
But, I'd rather live in Texas or Wyoming or even in Canada, Alberta or Calgary, where they have more sunny days to justify a large solar. And it has to be large. If you're mining, you need a lot of panels just to keep up with the 3 kilowatts per miner.
And Boomdust is saying use a Tesla home battery or a car to feed those S19s. That's if you're not driving around, just leave that car parked in the garage, charge it up overnight, and take advantage of the power that's been stored in it to power your ASICs through the daytime. I'm wondering if that's a possibility, but it may degrade the battery over time given how much it's going to be used. And
probably
who knows? That customer that you talked about in Savannah, Georgia, what happened with that without giving too much details? Did this type of setup actually work for them? Because I don't know exactly where Savannah is in relation to, Georgia typically is hot in the summertime, humid and so forth. But in the winter, I don't think it gets that cold, but maybe Savannah does. What did you do with that customer?
Yeah, so he had a couple old S19s that he couldn't really justify running unless he used them for heat. So Savannah gets about 4 to 5 months a year where the heat is on. It's not freezing, but it's cold enough to justify turning the heat on. So what he does is he heats in the winter and then diverts those ducts to mine that, or to throw that exhaust air straight out of the house through the I guess it's a gable vent in the roof. So, some people, it depends on their goals, right? Some people put a high price on KYC free sats. Other people, they do it as like a fun experiment. Some people, they do it altruistically. They just want to, help the network and kind of strengthen the security budget. So everyone has their own reason why they mine. But it's cool to see how it, for those who are like curious, engineering minded people, it's cool to see how they can use these things to solve different problems, dry their firewood, or make beef jerky. I've seen so many cool applications. There's a guy on the chat group that is doing maple syrup extraction. So yeah.
If you have excess heat, there's almost countless opportunities you could do with that. So it's just simply being blown out into the atmosphere. Oh man, redirected to something else and take advantage. That's the one beautiful thing about the ASICs, is that they generate tons and tons of heat that could potentially be repurposed into something, or purposed. Never mind, purposed into something. Who's this for? Like the people that want to have an ASIC installed in your home, and it's going to be providing heat to their central there's HVAC system. Who's going to be the home user? Who's going to be the customer that you're trying to target? Bitcoiners or just the average Joe?
It's mostly Bitcoiner. I'd say large majority of my clients are Bitcoiners, but there are a few who aren't. Most of them are at least Bitcoin curious, and that helps because, you know, what they're receiving in return for their electric bill is novel to them, and they're watching it grow. In many cases, almost all of my clients are just using it as a way to kind of passively stack sats because it's not increasing their overall expenses. So it's kind of just like you're displacing one expense with another, but that other expense kind of gives you a return. In my experience, if you don't have to sell those sats, then you can take advantage of long-term capital appreciation, which you know, it's a lot easier if you're replacing an existing cost versus, like, you know, the mega miners who are basically, they're not reusing heat. Heat's a problem for them, so they're paying to get rid of it. Whereas, you know, my clients are getting paid to use it. So it's a huge reversal in how it's done in the past.
Any particular pool you recommend people use? I'm sure they're not solo mining, so they're joining a pool. So what's your recommendation for people to point their hash rate to?
Hands down, ocean mining. I mean, they're the only one I've found that's actually has, you know, provable payouts. They've been paying way more. I've been doing some tests and spreadsheets on them versus the other FPPS pools, and Bitcoin Mechanic has a really good YouTube video on why FPPS kind of fails. They also have Datum, which lets you create your own templates. So for me, that's important. I'm not a huge fan of ordinals or runes, so I can express that worldview with Datum. And it's and then the Lightning payouts was just kind of like the aha. This is awesome, because now they're not a custodian of your Bitcoin. Every time they hit a block, you get paid. So for me, those three things kind of were a no-brainer. Like, that was why I switched to Ocean. I've got a lot of clients on Ocean. Everyone's super happy with it, and the Lightning payouts just kind of feels like magic. Like, it's if you're used to waiting for like a threshold, getting paid every day, which is what's kind of happening lately. I think they hit a block every 22 hours on average now. So that would be what I recommend for my clients currently.
Yeah, it's a steady stream of, and you could watch your wallet and see it. You know, there's growth there. So it's a wonderful way of getting paid if you're doing it on a small scale. If you're large scale, you don't give a fuck because you're going to reach that minimum threshold. But somebody that's doesn't have a lot of hash rate and they're pointing it to a pool, that Lightning stuff is just amazing. And there's at least 2 people in the chat that heat their homes or the areas of the home with ASICs, and one, we got Narwhal, he's using an S9, and so it's only 2 of 3 working boards was able to do its thing to keep some areas of his home nice and warm. And he's dealing with the extra heat is opening up the windows. That's awesome. So it's manual, but what you're proposing or what you're doing, this is all automatic, right? The ambient temperature in which it's inside the ducting itself is throttling, or the input of the energy is being varied by the ambient temperature. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. That was the big aha moment for these systems, because, you know, it turns it into like a thermostat controlled heater that pays you instead of, you know, a Bitcoin miner that you can use the heat. It's really prioritizing the heat first, which was the big aha moment. And then once you do that, you basically you're capitalizing on the fact that you can run downclocked for, let's call it 60 to 70% of the duty cycle. So you can take these old machines that are, let's call them like a JPro, is like 30 joules per terahash, so not profitable at current electric rates. But if you run it at 1500 watts, 1600 watts, you're in the profitability range of like a K-Pro, which is like triple the price and will give you a slight profit mark. Like, so there's some interesting synergies with a system that automates or automatically downclocks according to ambient. And it's really interesting how, you know, these machines are designed to target a hash rate and then modulate wattage and fans to suit that. So you're just steady hash rate. If you let the hash rate take a back seat and you're looking at ambient temperature, and then you use the ambient temperature to drive the fan speed, which drives the wattage, it's like a reversal of how it's typically done, but it's the best way to kind of have like an appliance grade heater from a Bitcoin miner. They're so much more programmable than a propane HVAC system, which is just fire, no fire, fire. Even some of the newer ones, they have like, 2 out of 4 burners on and then 4 out of 4 burners on. It's still kind of like overkill, which creates the need for like a 15 to 30 minute duty cycle where it's bang on, bang off. This is very different from that. And what it lets you do is like a 2,500 square foot home will have like a 60,000 BTU furnace. The rule of thumb for me is you can get away with a third of that by increasing your duty cycle 3 times. So if instead of a half an hour duty cycle, your minimum duty cycle is like an hour and a half, 2 hours, which allows you to do that, extra long run time at lower wattage, and just use the electricity that you need, which is huge. It doesn't, you're not mining more than you need and then blowing out the heat that you don't need. You're actually tuning down so that your electrical bill doesn't grow to like what a mining bill would be. It's still a heating bill. So I guess the anecdote here is at my home here, before I went to heating at Bitcoin miners, I had 2 utility bills, 2 main ones. I had propane, which is about $200 a month, and then I had electrical, which is about $200 a month. After heating with Bitcoin miners, now my electrical bill is about $400 a month, but I'm getting just a little bit more than $400 a month back in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So that's attractive to me. That I really liked.
So let's use that example, a 2,000 to 2,500 square foot home. And say somebody calls you and asks you for your recommendation, what needs to be installed. What type of ASIC, which variant, which model would you recommend for that type of setup? And secondly, what would be the cost to have it all installed? Like we're talking purchasing it, the cutting of the ductwork, all that shit. What would be the final cost to get that installed?
So that depends on the particular electric rate. For this example, we'll just use Ontario. I think it's if you're curtailing on peak, you're about 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So for the US listeners, it's about just under 10 cents per kilowatt hour US. So for that, you can actually get away with like a J Pro, which is, you can find them for $500-600 used typically.
That's Canadian or US?
Canadian. But okay. Again, like that's today. If the price keeps going up, if Bitcoin price keeps going up, the ASICs will keep going up as well. So timing the buys is kind of important for someone like me. So I can keep stock because, if the Bitcoin price quickly goes to 200K, that's going to be really hard to find these things. But the justification for installing one will be, so much more valid. So, sorry, what was your original question again? What's the typical process? Oh yeah. So once I, know your electric rate and I can tell you which miner works best, then typically 1 miner per 1,000 square feet. So 2,000 square foot home, 2 miners. Then it comes down to designing them, and that comes to some preferences. Did you want filtered air, which is a recommendation of mine? You can filter the air going into the miner, so it keeps the hash boards cleaner, less chance for fire, and it filters your air. It's like an air purifier on steroids because of the amount of CFMs that are moving through these things. So there's all these additional benefits. So then, I'll design the system, show up, install it. As far as pricing, there are some advantages to, there are some economies of scale. So 2 miners can fit on 1 PDU, 1 PDU switch, 1 fan controller, and 1 L630 outlet. So 1 miner is about $3,000 for an S19J Pro with, all the shrouds and filters and the whole kit, basically, ducting, flanges. 2 miners is only about $4,200 because, again, that you can economize by having 2 on some of the same infrastructure. And I always recommend overpowering a system versus under, because 2 miners underclocked will run more efficiently than 1 severely overclocked. So the idea here is you run very efficiently most of the time, most of the year. And then on those like minus 30 days, you can keep up with it by having the miners automatically overclock when the demand is there.
In terms of the setup, it sounds like it's going to be in parallel, in series, right beside each other. Is that correct?
That's
Rather
correct.
than being
Yeah.
So, okay. So 2 right beside each other. It's not creating like any noise, like, because you're having two units right beside each other. I do know that it's being driven by the ambient temperature, the fans being driven by that, but still in a home, depending, the clientele, is it noisy enough that it's going to be noticeable by people, or is it just quiet, you won't even tell it's on?
It's less noisy than when the furnace kicks on for its regular duty cycle.
Okay.
It's actually like one miner is less noisy than one of the air purifiers I have sitting on the counter beside it downstairs. And that's because most of the time you're running at fan speed 4 or 5. Now that's 4 or 5 out of 10. Fan speed 10 out of 10 is 806 CFM, which I think is double what the 4 computer fans, the stock computer fans, are able to produce on a Bitcoin miner. So the idea here is everything's super overbuilt. I looked at how appliances are generally built with all the redundancies and layers of basically safety redundancies. And the idea here is it's got to be super overbuilt, because if you want to run it like an appliance inside of a house, you have to take some extra precautions and things to do that properly and safely. What was I going to mention? Yeah, the fans are they're designed for like industrial HVAC applications, so they're spec to run I think 7 years straight at 100% duty. So that's like where your, I guess, most critical point of failure is. If your fan dies while your miner's on and you've got overheating problems, the firmware does automatically shut down, but you never want to test that. So the whole idea here was just figuring out ways to design this in a way that's as I guess we'll use a Bitcoin critics terminology here, anti-fragile as possible.
Favorite firmware?
LuxOS has been, I've tried so many, and LuxOS has just been the best for me because of how responsive it is in overclocking and underclocking. What I like about it is, so I have a couple clients who have garages, like automotive garages, and I love that application because you have large bay doors that are constantly opening and closing, and they're letting all that heat out. So the idea here is the miners will kick on real high when the doors open to try to get the ambient back to comfortable. And then, once the doors are closed and the machines have been running on high for a bit, it'll automatically downclock. And how responsive the miners are to those, minute by minute changes. You can set the increment for how often it's taking the temperature of the chips. So you can set it to 1 minute so that, every minute you're making sure you're not under or overpowered as to what the demand is.
As for maintenance on the machines, what's required by the homeowner?
So it's basically just changing the filter. Every like 3 to 4 months, the filter should be changed. Now, I would say, to just pop off the shroud and clean the miner out every year. But I was curious if that was even really a necessity. So I've had a couple miners in my mining shed at a property up north go for like 3 years without a single cleaning. They seem to be pretty good. There's a couple other people on X that are like, yeah, the dust doesn't do anything. And then you hear stories of people who are cleaning their miners frequently and then like breaking them because they're too vigorous with their cleaning. So I think if you have a filter, you're pretty much just get like visual inspection, making sure there's no like chunks of fur in there, which I've received used miners that had things like that in them. But I say once you filter that intake air, the hash boards kind of look how, after a year of use, they look how they did on day one. So it's really cool to see how those things work.
And when it gets warm, say for the late spring, summer, fall, it's not running at all. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's where the Wi-Fi PDU switch kicks in. If the firmware can't lower the wattage enough to keep you at a comfortable temperature, for example, this would happen if your outside ambient temperature is above your desired interior ambient temperature. So it's 25 outside, you want 22, miner's on. Once you get up to your desired off temperature, the Wi-Fi PDU switch cuts the power to the miner, and then you can have your bang on temperature where if it gets under. So there's periods where like actually around now where during the day it's warm enough not to have them on, but then at night it'll dip down. So if it goes below your, in my house I have it at 20 degrees Celsius. If it goes below 20, they'll just automatically turn back on. and then downclock until they get to, I think I have them off at 22.8, and then at 22.8, bang, off, and then I'll wait again. So you do duty cycle, but the firmware allows you to really lengthen that, so you're not on, off as a traditional HVAC system does.
And in terms of the ROI, what do you get daily on, given today's hash rate, and if it's a colder day, what would typically a homeowner get in terms of sats per day?
Yeah, so I don't know.
I know it's a variable question. I mean, depending on the temperature, but I'm just curious what somebody would be expecting for some sort of return.
What I did was I did a calculation at like 75% duty, which is pretty typical if you're looking at it throughout the year. So at 75%, you make just under like $200 on like a J Pro, like 175 Canadian, 185 depending on the day. And the electricity expense is around there. It's about 170, 180. So if you are replacing that existing cost, you're not forced to sell. So essentially you make 180 a month, 200 a month. I mean, a few weeks ago, it was over 200 a month. So, as you know, things change, hash price changes, and it changes frequently. It's a really volatile metric, but over the long run, it's I feel like it's really worth it. And about 18 months to 24 months is the typical ROI. Now, I started mining in like the depths of the bear market. And what's interesting about that is my profitability was about the same as it is now. So, it's kind of funny. It allows you to take advantage of long-term appreciation only if you don't have to sell it. So I was thinking, okay, what's the best mechanism for having me not have to sell it? Like what's the best way to not become a forced seller? And by replacing an existing expense, I thought was a really cool way to do it. And
what sort of power input are you generally using? Is it low key with 120 or 220 with the stock power?
The typical installs are 220 or 240, just because you can get a lot more out of the miners. I'll usually try to tee off an existing appliance, like an oven outlet, which usually has more than enough headroom to run miners on. The other thing I've done is had like a licensed electrician come in and just install the L630 outlet to beside the furnace, so where I need it. I grab Wi-Fi with like a range extender, so as long as there's Wi-Fi available, I can grab it and use it for the miners. What I have recently got onto is the low-key stuff, the 120 volt. It's the whole idea of guerrilla mining is really appealing to me. Being able to just plug into any North American NEMA 15 wall outlet and mine sats while using the heat, and you can use your cell phone, as a router. So as long as you could be mining sats in a hotel room. So that's really appealing to me, and I've kind of become like a 120 volt junkie. I'm building stuff and I'm getting stuff 3D printed, and going down that rabbit hole pretty hard lately.
And you were talking about the Wi-Fi signal. Does that get interrupted within the ducting itself? Is that something that you don't get a very strong signal inside the ducting, or am I wrong?
No, the miners don't go in the ducting. What I do is I integrate them with like an 8-inch duct flange. So the miners are outside of the ducting.
Okay, I got it.
The Wi-Fi PDU switch, I use a polycarbonate case so that the signal for that Wi-Fi component isn't interrupted. I was looking at metal boxes originally, enclosures, and I was like, oh wait, that's not going to work because of the Wi-Fi. So yeah, no, I took it into consideration and never had any problems. The cool thing about mining is, you can have hundreds of miners on like a dial-up connection because of the block size is so small and so infrequent that your data packets you don't need any real intense throughput. And this is something I should look at more, because I could essentially have like an eSIM on an old phone running the whole site up north instead of paying for like Rogers and then never, not using all of it. So the throughput requirement's super low, so you can just get any range extender, and as long as you can get like a 2.4G gigahertz connection, works great.
It could also repurpose my old 2400 baud modem, right? I could probably put that to. You're probably too young to even remember the 14.4, 33.6, or 56K modem, but yeah, back in the day, that's what we used to connect to the internet. We used to use the old dial-up modem.
Dial-up, so I remember the noise.
And it was slow as fuck, man. It was slow as fuck.
If someone picked up the phone, there goes your internet.
Yeah, done. So whatever you're downloading, you got to start from scratch, unfortunately, unless you had a download manager.
That JPEG that took 45 minutes to get in there.
No, man, it's the games we used to fucking
Oh, I
pirate back in the
remember.
day. Oh my fucking God.
Yeah.
It's, anybody that does not have central heating with HVAC and all that shit, like what options do they have available to them if they call you and say, I want this type of setup?
So if they call me, they have a need. They don't have central HVAC, but let's say they're using like baseboard heaters, which is typical if you don't have. Then there's a really good justification for running these as just like a space heater. The challenge becomes distributing that heat. So this is why I've been looking more and more into like the 120 volt low keys. You can, instead of having one really powerful miner centrally in the house and then unable to kind of distribute the heat, you could have 2 or 3 or 1 per floor, but have them, as low key rigs where you're kind of tapped out at like 1400 watts. But 1400 watts times 3, if you have 3 floors, it should do the job. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at more and more, trying to figure out cost-effective ways to build these. And then I really want to create something that's like plug and play, where I set it up before I send it to client with their desired mining pool, their payout, everything set up so that they just plug it in when it arrives, and then they see their balance going up every month.
What do you think is going to happen in the future with this? Where do you see this transforming in the not too distant future? Because there's got to be some sort of change in this, right? To make it easier for the homeowner to do this. And will Bitmain create its own unit that you could just simply plug it into your ducting and go from there? Like, where do you see this moving forward? Because it's very exciting stuff. Maybe
I think people will move away from Bitmain just because of their concentration with the pools. And they're constant. Like I think it's over 70% of all of the hash rate is derived from some sort of Bitmain product, which again, that's a bit of a metric that you don't like to see. So I like I've been following what Block has been doing pretty closely. They're looking at like a modular kind of free open source hashboard project. So yeah, I really like that idea where you're not kind of chained to a form factor. If it becomes Lego, then you can really design something that's application specific, and you can probably do it at a lot less cost, because when you're, when I buy one of these things and I have to modify them, you're just throwing parts out. I have like a bin of fans that, because I use all the AC Infinity fans. So it'd be cool to, be able to kind of look at it as like a buffet and pick and choose from a menu and kind of Lego everything together.
Do you notice there's an uptick in people asking for this type of service? Not because it's cold outside, but just in general because of interest with mining and repurposing the heat from those mining equipment?
But yeah, judging from like the metrics on my Twitter engagement and others who are in the space, it's cool to see how it's becoming more and more mainstream amongst Bitcoiners. A few of us were invited to speak at the Bitcoin conference on the mining stage about heat reuse. So that's really cool. I'm looking forward to that. And
that's the one in Canadian or the one in the States?
No, the Vegas, the big one in Vegas.
Okay.
Will be, there's a few kind of heat reuse people that I met in Denver actually it's going to be cool to see them again. And so yeah, it's even on like the more kind of financialized or financial focused audiences and what's it called, conferences. It's becoming more and more like, I don't think a year ago it would have been viable, but in the last year, it's like, again, innovation through necessity. It becomes harder and less profitable, so it's forcing people into finding ways to capitalize on that heat instead of just have it as a waste product and get rid of it and have it as a problem. So a lot of the stuff that hydro and immersion mining is doing, it's cool to see that now there's some air products out there that allow you, like there's like a little baseboard heater from Canaan out there. There's a mini miner from them. I think What's Miner just came up with a hydro unit that runs on 220. So it's most of those are 3-phase. This one just runs on a single phase. So there's a whole bunch of options out there. And I think some of them even now have higher chip temps. So better for like helping boil the water and things like that. yeah, I think we're just going to get an explosion of products in the next couple of years because at a necessity, it's going to go to the cheapest places for the cheapest power, unless you have a justification for the heat, and using the heat as like an input to a product. That's like the real dream. I was thinking about zoos the other day, all these tropical animals, right? Like there's so many ways, and then you could use the revenue to improve the conditions or the food quality for these animals. So there's so many ways that you could just plug and play miners right now and benefit the end user, whether it's a person or animal, right away.
Have you talked to the people at the Canadian Bitcoin conference? Because given the clientele over the people attending, obviously it's going to be a majority Canucks that are very cold in the winter. So have you discussed with them to maybe do a presentation at the Canadian Bitcoin conference in Montreal?
I reached out. They were looking for someone to heat a large space with Bitcoin miners. I was like, I wonder if they're actually going to heat the venue. I reached out, but I haven't heard back. I'd love to talk there or to connect with somebody to talk about it there, or even to help them heat their space. I'd be happy to bring, low-key units or whatever it is, because there's a huge impact when you physically interact with the hardware, I think, and you see, it sounds this loud, it's this big, it makes this much Bitcoin every month, it costs this much to run. If you can just get those 4 boxes checked, a lot of people, they get the fever and they're just like, how can I get one? Like, how can I get 2? Once one's installed, they're like, how can I do the garage now? How can I do the basement? So that's cool to see. It kind of makes me feel like I'm on the right path.
Narwhal said in the chat, he didn't directly ask this question, but he says he's not familiar with the low-key kit. And we talked about low-key and we've referenced it many times. Maybe you just give a brief overview of what is a low-key kit.
Yeah, sorry, I should have gone into that more. So a really genius builder named Zach Baumsta, who owns a company called Pivotal Pleb, designs a whole bunch of really cool components that allow you to modify your Bitcoin miners, that allows you to modify them so that you can bring them in the home and use them for heat reuse or just to quiet them down or whatever it is. The low-key chip is a chip that lets you ditch the APW12 power supply, which is a 240 volt, 220 volt power supply. Grab an old S9 power supply, whether it's an APW3++ or an APW7, and then just basically have that, plug in 120, 110 volt standard outlet power supply, power the Bitcoin miner. It kind of tricks the control board into the correct voltage. So it limits your overall hash power. So usually you'd have to remove 1 or 2 hash boards. But what it lets you do is use those other 2 hash boards in their own modules. So you can kind of decentralize. You can take one miner, decentralize it into 3 miners, 1 per floor and 1 per outlet. So, most homes don't have, in North America, they don't have NEMA L630s. They have the NEMA 15s, but they have them everywhere. So this lets you kind of take advantage of those outlets just being everywhere. Now, every outlet is available to you. And with the Wi-Fi on board, you don't even need Wi-Fi. You could use your phone to mine. So, I see these things being, extremely effective, for mold remediation or bed bug remediation. Like in the summer, there's a whole bunch of things you could do with 120 volt versions because you can just bring them anywhere.
In terms of anything we didn't touch upon that we should be touching upon, I'm going to throw this out to you. Is there something else that you want to talk about that we didn't? Something I missed in this whole conversation?
No, I think that was a pretty good overview. I think we hit on all the major points. I'm just looking at my little cheat sheet here. It's those are the kind of the main. It's just for me the incentives. I guess the overall thing here is the incentives just made so much sense for me that I would have regretted not pursuing this. I'm getting a lot of good feedback in the form of clients coming back for additional miners in other homes or other areas of the house. So if you're curious, reach out to me. I love chatting about this stuff, and if I can help you out, I'd love to do it.
How can they reach you?
Best way is through my website. There's a little online form you can fill out, and it goes to my email. And also
what's that again?
That's 256heat.com. Also on Twitter, at TronMonGon. It's a weird name. I really didn't think too hard about it before I typed it out.
Toine, sorry to interrupt. Just to give you everybody here a heads up, it's in the description below. I put a link to your Twitter account and also your website, just in case you want to just do easy click. It should be there in the description below. So didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Len.
Yeah. Anything else? Any final thoughts? Anything that you just want to get off your chest before we wrap this one up and tie a bow on it?
Man. Really appreciative of you having me on, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah. Anytime there's some more activity, more movement involvement at this, let me know. I'll be happy to bring you on. So with that, hope you enjoy this. And Toine, appreciate you taking the time to come on to the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast on a rare Tuesday edition for me, because normally I do this on Wednesday, but I have a birthday tomorrow, not mine. Very, very close person in my life that's having a birthday. So with that, we'll be back at this on Monday. So take care.
Thanks.